Our small introduction is is divided into three pieces. That means first we give some general principles. Secondly, I will show on the case of Lahemaa National Park how the community involvement was turned into community power. That was for the benefit of all stakeholders and right holders, actually. And in the chapter of 3, Riin talks about Tallinn UNESCO Old Town and about these issues of economic and sharing the economic benefits and local communities and tourism problems as well.
So I will take from this slide. And I hope that you know what are these organizations like ICCROM, ICOMOS, and IUCN. We are the advisory bodies of the World Heritage Convention, but the activities that we carry out are far beyond the reaches of World Heritage itself. And actually, it was our Common Dignity initiative, or other words, rights-based approaches initiative, started in 2011, and the leaders in this group were the Norwegians, who have long history with human rights issues, and they have also the strengths to carry out the activities. But now this initiative has ended up as an sort of like an umbrella working group in ICOMOS. That in ICOMOS we had the system that we are divided into the national committees and the international scientific committees, but we have also 4 working groups which are like overreaching all the others. And our Common Dignity Working Group is one of them. The other is reconstruction, and then it is climate change and sustainable development goals. And our Common Dignity Working Group, I should say, is one of the most active ones in ICOMOS. We have monthly meetings, Zoom meetings. That's why we have experienced Zoom also before. And the idea is what Ava already told about, is to promote the respect for the rights of the communities, to promote the good practices, and to develop and recommend relevant tools and guidelines. I think the last one is the most tricky one, because as you all well know, all the situations are slightly different, and it is not about working out the documents for the authorities who sit in the offices, but it is also about, it's mostly about the reach to the local people. And as a little bit more for the background of why it is so relevant now, is that we have had the legislation of cultural heritage. It started already in 19th century, and it has developed through the full 20th century, but the spirit of the legislation is changing from original restrictions and guidelines and things like that. It's going to be more and more soft, and this is also a good moment for this, our Common Dignity initiative, to work in this more soft situation. The problem usually is that that the legislation is very tight. It is not flexible at all, but at the same time our values are changing. The values are flexible, and it causes tensions between the values and the rules. So it's our point to step in. But Ava, if you can change the slide.
Yes, I can.
Then there is on European level, a document that you probably know very well, and that has been cited also these last days. So I will not repeat it in the full sense, but the Faro Convention, the European Convention from 2005, is about to put people at the center of heritage protection. Each individual is granted the right to participate in the cultural life. And what is also important is that the Faro Convention emphasizes on the cultural heritage and its sustainable use, which is something that we are repeating each other in these days. It's important and relevant. We have to admit that Faro Convention is not ratified by a huge number of European countries, including Estonia. And it is, in a sense, it is very, very weird because all the principles in this Faro Convention, they are so simple and straightforward and logical. So it's very, very hard to understand why there has been so much influence that it is not ratified by Estonia, generally a green and sustainable country so far, but luckily our Minister of Culture has just restarted the process just a couple of weeks ago. So we have high hopes for this.
Good, yeah.
But I guess we will leave the Faro Convention here and move on to the next slide, because
one comment on Faro Convention, because the other thing when we are talking about this holistic approach to culture and environment, and Faro Convention is one of the first conventions to specifically talk about cultural environment as such, not only cultural spaces as in UNESCO intangible heritage case, but as a landscape, cultural landscape as such. So that is one of the points that actually in Estonian constitution, for example, we are talking still on living environments or natural environments, but this cultural environment actually notion is maybe something that while ratifying Faro Convention is for the benefit of Estonia as well. Although in practice, actually, yes, we are Heritage Conservation Act as well as Nature Conservation Act give people this procedural rights to say a word during the process of management and government of heritage. But back to the principles, then when we are talking of rights-based approaches, it is embedded in human rights, and it is embedded in the cultural rights. And I just want to point out these 2 points. Normal-wise, we are talking on 27.1 this part of cultural rights, where everyone has the right freely to participate in cultural life of the community, to enjoy the arts and share scientific advances and its benefit. But actually, as to communities and community members' rights, and as to especially indigenous people's rights, we must take into account that they have moral and material interest resulting from their own production, that there are creation and authorship of these communities involved there as well. So that is the other aspect of that, and that's why I wanted to specifically point out these parts of this 48 Convention Declaration as well, and some principles or some basics of rights-based approaches. that we offer standards on processes and consultations, as Eliza pointed out, how to get all these people around the table, how to have the interest and common aims for all those people. And there are some basic things that there must be some common interest, there must be mutual respect and equity between the partners, and some basic stuff like that. And then definition of duty bearers and right holders different from stakeholders. Actually, that is something that is currently in UNESCO World Heritage Operational Guidelines as well, pointed out from last year onwards. That means that right holders, heritage communities, local communities, religious communities as to the religious heritage, for example, or communities of practice as to specific practice, or have the rights, substantive rights and procedural rights different for other interested parties because they own and are creators of that heritage in most of the cases, actually. And duty bearers, that means state, that means local government, that means us when we are dealing from the guarding the public interests, dealing with heritage. That means we must ensure that all these interests are taken into account in conserving and promoting heritage. And
may I interfere with just one notion that these right holders, they are usually the communities, but communities can be very diverse. They can be really these aboriginals, the native people there, but it can also be the later layers that have come to live. And I think it's very common in our cities that we have the suburbs where we have the people living from like 1920s, 30s, 40s, the families, but then there are the newcomers from 2000s. They are also a community. And the other interesting issue actually to food for thought is that who are the experts? Are the experts the duty bearers or are they right holders? Because they have dedicated their professional lives to study some things, so they both have the rights and they have the duties, so they are somewhere in between those groups.
Interested parties, yeah. Somebody mentioned also. And as well, entitlements and responsibilities. When you have rights and when you have power, you have a responsibility. As simple as that. Normal-wise, when we have this co-governance with local communities, on Saturday, Michael pointed out that when you give power to local communities, somehow you don't give money. So it is not voluntary work. When local communities or communities are heritage communities are equal partners, that means equal share of economic benefits and economic assets as well. Then coverage of both individual and collective rights. That means that from the point of view of community member, as well as from the point of view of community as a whole. And then coverage of both substantive and procedural rights. That means economic, social, cultural rights, as well as due process of law, information, justice, participation. So both these aspects. Normally, we stick to this free prior informed consent only, and not taking account into this economic and social and cultural rights aspects. It happens quite oftenly. So.
Can I add something?
Yeah. Oh, hello there, Thorsten.
Hi. When you're talking about rights, this does not mean laws, right? So it's more an ethical term how you use it.
Actually, it is a twofold notion. Actually, as we are talking about human rights principle and procedural and substantive rights, we are talking about laws as well. Yes, locals can protect their rights in the courts, and actually that is one aspect. The other aspect is ethical principles and moral principles and obligations and general attitudes. But actually, as we are talking about rights, yes, intellectual property rights, public law, constitutional, administrative, international law, and from the other hand, property rights, intellectual and material rights. So actually, we are in this bundle of real legislative rights.
I'm more thinking about the local people, for example. If you say, you brought this example, that you have a community which is long-standing, people who were born at a place and suddenly new people come in.
Yep.
Usually there is no law, you know, which they cannot say we have more rights than the people that came in now. And my question would be how this, how you see this, yeah.
I have to, as I'm really managing and governing as environmental board and in national parks, and we do have 10,000 people, and we do have cooperation council, and we do have local community rights. We have, there are two types of, first it is about indigenous peoples. When we are talking about UNESCO indigenous peoples convention, it is a bit more different than local communities, because international legislation has defended the land use rights for indigenous peoples as different, exclusive rights as different from other people. But when we are talking about local communities, actually it is this geographical community who declares as in intangible heritage case themselves to be the part of that local community in difference of the period. But in the case of Lahemaa National Park, for example, that you must live in this area more than half a year.
So is the goal of your working group to help people to get these rights as legal rights, basically? Like it, I mean, it is
no. To think, to empower people and to think about these issues.
Yeah, but I wanted to add that actually this rights-based initiative method, it's not about like providing fixed solutions, that not fixing the rules, but it's more about identifying all these groups of people, all different communities who should be involved in the decision-making process. So it's when you look on this list on the map, that if we have a problem to solve, then the first thing that in this rights-based initiative we do is that we start to identify who are the members of the process who have to be included. So which types of communities, and then you start to balance. The most important thing is to give voice to everybody. And if you give voice to everybody, then you start to balance the outcome and the decision-making process. And what Hara is referring to, she's working really in a national park, and they have a very balanced situation, although they have a turbulence every now and then on different issues. But
lawsuits.
But Lahemaa is quite an exception in the general view, because they are more or less like territorially a manageable area. When we come later to other, for urban situations, it's not so easy. But the main interest here is to empower those people who are usually left behind, because either they are not active, or they are shy, or they don't trust in themselves, or who can be we have several like local societies where this local people voices are manipulated by some other more powerful people who take the lead in this local society, but they protect their own interests and not the interest of the society in general. So it's the idea again behind this rights-based approaches is that we try to balance, we try to look through this scheme and try to be as transparent as possible to see that nobody is really left behind or nobody is manipulated. It's an idealistic approach, but we need it.
And Thorsten, you are absolutely right asking this real rights question, because normal-wise local communities think they don't have rights to their heritage, and that is a mistake actually, because this all procedural rights they have for sure. The other cases about their property rights, as community, and that can be turned as well, as you saw yesterday in the case of lazy local shop, for example. But it is about the central roles of marginalized and vulnerable groups, because it turns out that actually these heritage local community groups, when they are at the same level as all other interested parties, tourism companies, economic development companies, sure they are actually losing the ground. And
my question, I'm absolutely with you, and I feel also that the future job of interpretation is to empower the people, empower the local people, also to do this what the people in your shop actually did. I mean, that's a very an amazing example. The point is, in reality, the stakeholders are seen as equal. Like what Lisa just said, the brand marking branch is as strong as the ecologic branch, because that's the few, they think, okay, the economy is needed, so everybody who comes in should have the right also to make decisions. It's like building a factory in a rural area, these people have a significant influence suddenly because they create the jobs and so on. You know that. And that was just my question, because on the one hand, we are the ones who should help local people we should empower them actually to get active. But on the other hand, there must be some decision maker who says, yes, they have the right to do that, because otherwise they compete with a big company, not in your place maybe, but in Germany definitely. There is an investor who has a beautiful appearance, and you will see that many people follow these people because they smell the money. And then at that point you need the law, and otherwise otherwise it doesn't work. So that was just my question, to understand what your approach is, and I understood it. I just say there is the other side which we shouldn't forget.
And you are absolutely right. When locals don't have veto right, they are losing the battle actually. So that's it on the bottom line. So and actually it is of interest of all the companies to say that who are the locals, who are the communities, because they're making mad, and so locals' voice isn't heard at all actually in the end. So
thank you.
So. But we tried to go further, and Riin, and in 2018, when it was,
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm interrupted.
No.
I was just going to add to that there is an issue there that you may have the legal right to speak, to have a voice, but maybe you have societal issues where you're not able to speak because either the head of the community, the head man, it's usually a man, speaks for you, or your job might depend on it, or a whole load of other reasons why you feel you cannot speak. And so it's slightly naive to think that, we've got the right so we can do it, but actually there are whole loads of things that prevent you from doing it.
And that is the beauty of democracy. When you have this discourse, open discourse, and speak and speak, the more you speak with each other, the more strength you have of having this voice that everyone can say, actually. So, but it can be this top-down discourse can be changed, actually, during the course of the time when you have this.
Well, I've been in situations where it hasn't changed, or it may change only over a very long period, where you know, particularly if your job depends on a certain view and your employer is saying you will do it this way, then that is a big incentive for you not to speak.
Then you must change your superior, the mind of your superiors.
But actually,
I would like, Peter, you're perfectly right. But I must say, if I compare what was, for example, when 30 years ago and what is today, the perception of the people of what is ethically okay and what is ethically not okay. In Germany, we have, I would say, we have too much ethical pressure at the moment, but we have it. And you cannot, an employer would not be able to say in the public, because I think this is right, we will do it. He would have to deliver a reason. And we have at the moment very much pressure on companies in terms of social responsibility issues. So the companies who do not do this have really, they get a much pressure in the public, and the press is playing a big role in this. Not always a good role. I do not want to value that at that point. But we have a change in society. If I compare it to when I was going to school and as it is today, that there is much more interest in that people tell why they do something and not just say, I do that because I'm rich or because I'm powerful. So I believe that we can influence that by empowering people. And I just say there is a ceiling somewhere, and somewhere the right, in the end, the law counts. And that's, I think it's a complex thing. So it's not just we work on one part, but others need to work on other parts that this whole structure somehow functions.
Yeah, I wasn't being negative so much as saying that it's a big issue. It's more complicated.
Yeah, there are issues when it's legally sort of regulated. For example, like the detailed planning process, which I think is similar in all European countries, that if you have a detailed planning, then all the neighbors and everybody who is interested can step in and give their opinion. But we see so many times that the municipality is just overruling this, it's ignoring these opinions. But as the more you protest, the more you take it out, these issues, the more it starts to work.
Yeah.
Rights are never given for granted.
Yeah. But please carry on.
Yep. But actually, the other thing is about that de jure de facto. 15 years ago, it wouldn't have been possible to put de jure previous informed consent of locals. So we did it actually de facto. And now it is time that with Faro Convention that we can put it some legal basis as the de jure as well when talking about government of some state protected area. So it is another angle that something that is de jure and what happens de facto. So Riin, please, Buenos Aires Declaration, 70 years of human rights declaration.
Yeah, it is the contribution of our working group through ICOMOS. We had an ICOMOS annual meeting just on the 70th anniversary of the Human Rights Declaration. So we we celebrated it with Buenos Aires Declaration, and it's about the rights-based approach principles. So it was issued in December, 10th of December 2018, the ICOMOS statement on embracing human rights and the principles of free, prior, and informed consent, etc., which you can read on the screen. I will not read it out for you, but it's now sort of basic document of our working group.
And accepted by ICOMOS generally.
Yeah.
And interpretation is there as well. So, and the other.
Yeah, the other thing that we managed to do it is this, what we were discussing before, that the more you work, the more you raise your voice and give it concern, the more it matters. And last year, when there was a UNESCO World Heritage Committee meeting in Baku, we lobbied effectively into the World Heritage operational guidelines the principles of human rights in heritage protection. So what you see on the screen is the amended text of the operational guidelines, amended by our working group. So it's little by little, we move higher and higher.
And as you see in Article 12, variety of stakeholders and rights holders is explicitly mentioned there as well, and a human rights-based approach.
And ICOMOS is now working that the rights-based approaches is implemented in all our statutory documents.
As well as on heritage impact assessments of UNESCO World Heritage Sites, that operational these guidelines are circulating as well. So, and when it was March and it's COVID pandemic struck hard all the world, ICOMOS rights-based approach working group was of course concerned about heritage communities and their rights in the situation where, for example, much of the tourism was income of small heritage communities on the one side, and actually besides the health issues, economic issues that are currently so problematic there. And on the other hand, to see actually the resilience that exactly these small heritage communities have during the time of where global systems are collapsing, then how resilient small heritage communities can be. So we made that statement as well on the pandemics, and it is you can read on our webpage the bigger statement, as well as actually as to cultural rights and climate change. Rapporteur of cultural rights asked about input of ICOMOS on cultural rights and climate change issues, and our working groups of climate change, our common dignity and sustainable development, put together a document where we specifically mention that actually heritage communities, traditions, cultural heritage is the key to sustainable future, and special attention must be paid on it, and actually that during this specific time it is of utmost importance when talking about Green Deal and all that kind of solutions, that heritage is there as one of the central concerns in Europe and in the world. So, and do you want to say anything, Riin, or something? No. Before we are going to concrete cases? That I was almost chapter 2, local community rights in heritage, and Lahemaa National Park is the area that where I have been working 18 years now. So being both in the governing side, environmental board or Lahemaa National Park administration, where I started to work there, as well as on academic side, dealing with community rights and cultural landscapes, as well as from the expert point of view, and being a local as well. So I can be somehow in several shoes, but some general principles. What are these values that we are keeping? They are changing in the process of time as well. And in Lahemaa National Park, we have cultural landscapes and intangible heritage as well under protection. And here we must point out that when we are thinking about cultural heritage discourse as such, we must take into account that it is evolving in the time. And when in 2072 convention, it was all written there, of course, but the dominant strength was protection was put on the objects, such as in the Venice Charter, ICOMOS Venice Charter vein. Then in the 92 cultural landscapes approach, as well as NARA document, ICOMOS NARA document that put the traditions in the center of protection. And in 2003, international I'm talking about UNESCO documents here, intangible heritage, people, and creative process is already, and in 2005 actually, I like UNESCO Convention of Cultural Diversity and Quality of Life. It talks about cultural heritage, but it talks about creators and communities as authors of that cultural heritage. So this interaction of creativity and tradition is quite strong there. So when we are talking about cultural heritage and protection of cultural heritage, we are talking about all this protection of objects, protection of process, and protection of people. Currently in the center there are people. And when we are talking about communities, we are talking about heritage communities, it is about interest, practice, and local. Here I'm talking about geographical local communities that have actually rights to this specific heritage that are in their territories, actually. So when we are talking about rights holders, then it is individual permanent inhabitants, community that consists of permanent inhabitants. And when we are talking of fields of cultural heritage, then there is a difference, some slight differences as to rights in tangible, intangible heritage and cultural landscapes. For example, in case of cultural landscapes, we are talking about land use and resource use as well. That means traditional fishing, traditional forestry, traditional agriculture. And the catalogue of rights of individuals are rights to use, cultural rights, and property rights. And in the case of property rights, we are talking about intellectual property rights as well as material property rights. And in the case of local communities and community members, these are non-transferable rights. When we are talking about other property rights, you can buy intellectual property rights or land ownership, you can buy and sell. But when we are talking community rights, they are not transferable. And limitations of rights of individuals are of private interest and of public interest, and rights of the community are constitutive rights, right to define, govern, and protect cultural property. That I will give an example. And procedural rights, the best variant is prior informed consent, and exclusive rights, that of special land use, land ownership, or even in the intangible heritage in the case of indigenous peoples, of course. And rights can arise from decision of community as a result of historic tradition or in enactment of law. So not only law. And in the case of enforcement, it can be public law or private law or whatever. So I left that open because property rights are not only public law theme, but private law issue as well. So that is this Lahemaa National Park Cooperation Council, which was since 2009 onwards active, and in which de facto local communities have so-called veto right. De jure now since 2016 onwards, after a management plan was put into action. So before it was juridically it was like a counseling body, but de facto without consent of local communities, actually you can't do anything in cultural heritage protection if you don't want to have all the time conflicts, because we state as duty bearers must safeguard the cultural continuity of this area. So and without people you cannot do that. And locals are happy as well, because all that we agreed in the protection rules and management plan of Lahemaa National Park, that means state, defended the courts against developers. So it was win-win situation in the sense that and here we have these protection aims and management plans where cultural heritage values are under protection, and that means fishing traditions as well as folk culture, and it is state protection. So we must, in this specific case of Lahemaa National Park, think of legal perspective and juridical part of it quite solidly. And since 2016 onwards, because 2015, this Lahemaa National Park rules that were made together with local communities, we have defended several law cases, and one was about this whether procedural regulations were taken into account, and the voice of locals was taken into account, and we did win that against the developer, because developer said that it doesn't have this acceptance of local communities, but it really did. So and one case where locals, where we had since 2005 onwards very strong discussion, was when we in 2005-2007 environmental board, the Lahemaa National Park administration, so-called, was saying that actually former Soviet military objects of occupation are heritage value. Then in 2006 to 2009, it was simply struggle, because locals said, what? It is an occupation mark. You see in the left that Hara Harbour was full of locals and local activity, and now it is a huge 1,200 meters of military pier that was formerly no access to locals there, Soviet border guards, all this occupation marks there, and 1949 Estonian deportation from that specific village as well to somewhere Siberia. So locals, many of locals just wanted to demolish this thing. And then we had several negotiations, and actually after locals bought the ownership of 30 years property rights there. They started to value it a lot. And in 2012, it was already said by locals that it is of great value and so on. But we couldn't say that it is valuable before the locals said so. And that was really something that is shows you the process of democracy, that it can be hard, but the outcome is win-win. It was a 94 situation of that military harbor, and currently locals are having their workshops, all kind of teaching their kids to sail, and as well together with Estonian Academy of Arts we had our restoration and conservation of military art, and as well this local traditions. So it was hard, but the outcome of that process is a win for everybody, for the heritage as well as for the locals. So, and the other cases of interpretation and about exclusive rights and the other rights connected with it of intangible heritage. It is the case when together with scientific community and local community, huge inventory of intangible heritage of Lahemaa National Park was made, and which rights are concerned with that, and in all these documents, exclusive rights for villager. Every village was given to use these materials. But on the other hand, we must take into account that there are several rights concerned with all these materials, that although Estonian Copyright Act says that folklore isn't covered with intellectual property rights, for example, on every performance and every derivative of folk, there are authors. So when you give the exclusive rights to community, you must say that there are authorship rights and other rights concerned with that as well. So actually it is a whole set of different rights when you are talking about giving public access or giving something to some community, some exclusive rights. So and with these issues we were dealing, and it is more precisely described in the article that we sent as well. So. But the outcome is now that the locals can have it, and in the case of these materials that are put on the web, all authorship rights are taken into account. And when some, for example, author who has made some interviews says that he doesn't want that anymore, we take that out. So as to personal data protection and very strong regulation in Europe, you must take these things into account, otherwise you get very heavy fines. So, yeah.
Okay, it's my turn now. We are moving from idyllic landscape and countryside area, very well protected area, to the cities. And this is the picture of Tallinn Old Town. And Ave, if you can put on the next slide, or shall we?
Yeah.
Put the next one.
Interpretation, no.
Put the next slide, please.
Yeah.
Yeah. It is site that has been protected since 1966. We have the conservation area of Tallinn Old Town, and it is very early, as you know, for the conservation areas. There are very few examples earlier than that in Europe. And in 1997, it was then listed as a World Heritage Site. And the protection in Estonia is in that sense important that especially those who you are from Eastern Europe, you know that heritage had an extra value because it was something that existed before the Soviet occupation, and it carried this national ideas and values behind it, and it was highly accepted by the society. Things changed quite a lot in 1990s, and now we are slowly recovering from this enthusiasm of having a capitalistic times. And Ave, if you can put now the previous one, the interpretation slide, because this slide is dedicated to the theme of this conference, the interpretation. And as you saw from the last slide, that Tallinn is a very European, a very the core of it is a medieval city from the Hanseatic times. What we are very proud of is that we have preserved the medieval outlook of the city, the cityscapes and the streets and plots. These are all of medieval origin, of course, with a lot of different layers. And we ourselves are very much proud of this medieval layer, but as we are one of the cruise ship destinations, and the cruises take the tourists up to St. Petersburg, then for these people it is very often it's their first time that they see an Orthodox cathedral, which is up on the Dome Hill. And as Lisa told us before, that also in Hawaii they are now looking for more culture-oriented tourists, and the tourists that pay more but influence the site less. So are we. But at the same time, when we have all the activities that are planned for the culture-oriented tourists, so our souvenir shops are oriented to this really cheap tourists, and they are selling stuff that is not of Estonian origin, and this is one of the issues for us. And now the next, and then the next one.
Yes, yeah. But it brings in 27 euros every time.
Yes. But actually, what is our own interpretation of the city is that Tallinn is very much a living city. We still have a lot of people living in the old town, and even though the number of inhabitants is decreasing, but we are very proud that we still have a lot of ministries, a lot of public offices, but most of all, we have 8 schools inside the old town. 4 of them are big ones, and the other 4 are very small, some like small schools. But still, we have a lot of pupils coming every day to the city, and their teachers and their parents and grandparents. So this is how we keep it living. The next one, please. And we have an Old Town society that is very actively taking part in the activities of the Old Town. And but the problem is with all these kinds of societies that we also mentioned before in this earlier discussion is that the societies are not always very much aware of heritage issues. What they are very much aware are these like daily living issues like traffic, sometimes dog shit. It can be an issue that brings everybody together and in consent, but not so much on heritage. But still, the activities of this open society are highly accepted. Now the next one, please. The issue that is changing the life in Old Town is, of course, tourism. And as we know, it is a very funny and tricky issue on this moment when there is nobody moving around. But anyway, we have the number of inhabitants in the Old Town has decreased in 30 years from 15,000 to 3,000. And this 3,000 is estimated. It might be 2,000 or 3,000 people altogether. And it has become now one of the main issues of the Old Town society to fight with is the Airbnb rentals, all kinds of booking.coms and things like that, because the life in the Old Town has become very unsecure. There are, for example, historical houses where there are 16 apartments and there is just one family living permanently. The others are all changed into Airbnbs, so that people are changing every night or every second night there. And the last ones, they are also discussing that probably they should move out because they don't enjoy the life in the Old Town anymore. But this is quite common for everybody. And our next, please. But it is not only the question of local people, because it also spoils the expectations of the tourists. Because I remember from the first times that I used Airbnb, I was so fascinated of the fact that I could see how people really live. My very first Airbnb experience was in Bologna, and I got a room in the apartment of the local restoration architects. It was an overwhelming experience because they told me about the work, and really I could enjoy the really, really nice apartment and this local atmosphere. But this has been my, the other one was in Riga, where I really met the host in person and stayed in his apartment. But the rest of it is that these Airbnb apartments, they have long lost the local touch. They are more like hotel rooms. And the problem from the heritage issue is also that these apartments are heavily renovated. A lot of new bathrooms and toilets are installed, which destroys the heritage. Next one, please. Another issue of security, also for the local people and for the interpretation of the Old Town that we want to preserve as a city of Hanseatic origin and a living city. So it's very livable also it's very lively, not livable, but it's very lively late in the nights. And we have a street which is called a Bermuda Triangle because it has a lot of bars that are open almost till the morning hours. And it's very often that you have police going over there because there are a lot of fights. It used to be the British bachelors, but it's all kinds of other young people with too much energy and too few self-control that are ruling over there. And the strange issue is not that there are young people, which in a way it's normal, but the problem is that when the local people complain that the bars in the living areas should be closed down in normal hours so that they could sleep, they are told that you have the privilege to live in the Old Town, so you should tolerate it because it goes with the package of living in the Old Town. And the next slide. The next slide is really about, again, selecting who are the rights owners. Which community is the rights owners? Is this the tourists that come and the tourism people who earn money on this, or is it the local people that that live in the city? The lower picture, by the way, is one of the schools that is situated in the old town. They are situated in altogether 4 buildings, so they deck the full block in the city and the streetscape, and they are enjoying a traditional we call it St. Martin's Day, when you have to dress up, and it's more like in a way our local version of Halloween. So it's either that we keep the city for our people and the tourists can enjoy how the locals live here, or it is the tourists who enjoy and the locals who have to tolerate it. But I have come to the end of it. So Ave, you have the last slide, which hopefully we still have 15 minutes, so that it shouldn't be the slide, last one.